It began with a discovery that was never supposed to happen. Deep inside the late Queen's private study, behind locked drawers and carefully preserved papers, a single letter surfaced, one carrying Queen Camilla's name. What seemed like an ordinary document quickly became something far more explosive. When Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, realized its contents could shake the palace to its core. And once the letter left that room, there was no turning back. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. For years, the late Queen's private study had remained one of the most carefully protected spaces within royal history. Countless documents had been reviewed, archived, and preserved, each carrying pieces of a legacy that stretched across generations. Few people were ever granted access to those personal records, which is why Sophie's invitation to assist with the review of certain archived materials initially seemed routine. There was no expectation of controversy, no warning that hidden among decades of correspondence lay something capable of reigniting old questions and creating entirely new ones. Yet as folders were examined and forgotten files carefully sorted, staff members reportedly noticed an unusual sealed letter resting among personal documents where it seemingly did not belong. The discovery immediately stood out. It was not merely because the letter had remained hidden for so long, but because of the name connected to it. Queen Camilla. Even before the contents were fully examined, whispers began circulating among those present. How had such a document escaped previous reviews? Why had it never appeared in official records? And perhaps most importantly, why had it remained untouched until now? What happened next transformed curiosity into concern. Sophie, known throughout royal circles for her discretion and steady judgment, reportedly recognized almost immediately that the letter carried significance far beyond an ordinary piece of correspondence. Those familiar with the atmosphere surrounding the discovery described a growing sense of unease as questions multiplied faster than answers. Palace aides quietly began tracing records, searching archives, and reviewing old inventories in an effort to understand how a document linked to such a prominent figure could remain hidden for years without attracting attention. The deeper they looked, the stranger the situation appeared. Some believed it was a simple administrative oversight. Others suspected there was a more complicated explanation buried within decades of palace history. Meanwhile, rumors moved swiftly through royal circles. Private conversations became cautious exchanges. Trusted insiders began sharing fragments of information, each version slightly different from the last. Before any official statement could be considered, speculation had already taken hold. The discovery was no longer confined to a single room or a handful of people. It had become a growing mystery, one surrounded by uncertainty, secrecy, and the unmistakable feeling that something important had been overlooked. As word quietly spread through the palace, the weight of the discovery seemed to grow heavier with every passing day. Sophie found herself standing at the center of a story she had never intended to uncover, while aides struggled to contain mounting speculation. Some feared the letter could reopen sensitive chapters from the monarchy's recent past. Others worried that its contents might challenge long-held assumptions about decisions made behind palace walls. Yet nobody could fully understand the significance of the document without first reading what was written inside. And as anticipation intensified, one reality became impossible to ignore. The mystery was no longer about finding the letter. The mystery was about what the letter had been trying to say all along. Because the moment its seal was examined and its contents prepared for review, a far greater storm began gathering just beyond the horizon. But the letter itself was only the beginning, because what Sophie discovered inside would raise questions no one had dared ask during the Queen's lifetime. For years, the letter sat untouched among files believed to have been fully catalogued. Yet somehow, this document escaped every inventory, every review, and every transfer. The deeper Sophie looked, the stranger the mystery became. What had begun as a surprising discovery was now turning into something far more unsettling. The questions raised by the hidden letter refused to disappear. Instead, they multiplied with every attempt to explain them. The late Queen Elizabeth II was known for maintaining one of the most carefully organized private archives in royal history. Important correspondence was rarely misplaced, and sensitive documents followed strict procedures designed to ensure that every piece of communication could be traced, reviewed, and preserved. That was precisely why the existence of this letter created such unease among those tasked with understanding it. By all accounts, it should have been impossible for a document carrying such apparent significance to remain hidden for years without attracting notice. Yet there it was, sitting outside the official records, untouched by countless reviews that had supposedly accounted for every important paper left behind by the Queen. As Sophie continued examining the circumstances surrounding the discovery, palace archivists found themselves confronting an uncomfortable reality. The letter had not simply been overlooked. It appeared to have been stored separately from the normal collection of correspondence, almost as though it had followed a different path entirely. Nobody could immediately explain why. Some believed it may have been intentionally placed among personal materials rather than administrative records. Others wondered whether an instruction had once existed regarding its handling and had since been lost to time. The uncertainty created an atmosphere of growing tension. Every answer uncovered seemed to generate two new questions. Why had the letter never been publicly acknowledged? Why did no formal reference to it appear in archive summaries? And perhaps most troubling of all, who knew it existed before Sophie found it? The mystery soon attracted the attention of palace historians and royal researchers, individuals whose careers had been built on understanding the smallest details of royal history. They began tracing the document's origins, reviewing records that stretched back decades, and comparing inventories created under different administrations. What they discovered only deepened the intrigue. References connected to the period in which the letter was believed to have been written appeared, fragmented and incomplete. Certain records existed. Others seemed absent altogether. The gaps were not large enough to prove wrongdoing, yet they were impossible to ignore. Quiet discussions turned into serious reviews as experts attempted to reconstruct a timeline that nobody had questioned until now. Meanwhile, Sophie found herself under increasing pressure. Some advisors reportedly urged caution, arguing that further investigation risked reopening sensitive chapters of royal history. Others believed the matter should be settled privately and quietly. But Sophie remained determined. The more resistance she encountered, the more convinced she became that a full examination was necessary. This was no longer simply about a forgotten document. It was about understanding why that document had remained hidden for so long. Every step forward seemed to reveal another layer of secrecy, another piece of a puzzle that refused to fit together. And as historians, archivists, and trusted advisors continued their search through decades of records, one unmistakable feeling settled over the palace. The truth was getting closer. The answers were somewhere within reach. Yet nobody was prepared for the discovery that was about to emerge from the shadows. As experts traced the letter's path through decades of royal history, one detail stood out above all others, and it pointed directly toward Camilla. The moment Sophie read the key passage, the atmosphere changed. Suddenly, this was no longer a forgotten piece of correspondence. It had become a potential royal bombshell. Until that moment, the mystery had revolved around the letter's existence. Now, attention shifted to its contents, and the implications were impossible to ignore. Those who had spent days trying to understand how the document had remained hidden suddenly found themselves asking a very different question. Why had it been written in the first place? According to sources familiar with the review process, one particular section immediately captured Sophie's attention. It contained references allegedly connected to Camilla's position within the royal family, references that seemed significant enough to demand careful scrutiny. The language was measured, the tone deliberate, yet the deeper Sophie examined the passage, the more she realized that this was not the type of correspondence that could simply be filed away and forgotten. Something about it felt important. Something about it felt unfinished. Word of the discovery spread cautiously among a small circle of trusted individuals. Palace insiders who were briefed on the situation reportedly reacted with a mixture of surprise and concern. Some struggled to understand why such a document had never been discussed before. Others questioned whether its contents had been intentionally overlooked because of the sensitive issues it appeared to touch upon. The uncertainty created a growing sense of tension behind closed doors. Every conversation seemed to generate competing theories. Every review raised fresh doubts. What had initially appeared to be a historical curiosity was rapidly evolving into one of the most intriguing mysteries surrounding the royal household in years. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Sophie reportedly chose to proceed carefully. Rather than allowing speculation to spiral out of control, she quietly shared the document with a handful of trusted advisors whose judgment she respected. Their reactions only deepened the intrigue. Some believed the letter contained information capable of reshaping public understanding of certain events that had long been viewed through a single lens. They argued that historical narratives are often built upon incomplete information and that the emergence of previously unseen correspondence could force a reassessment of what people believed they knew. Others strongly disagreed. They warned that context matters, that isolated passages can easily be misunderstood, and that releasing sensitive material without a complete understanding of its background could create more confusion than clarity. As debate intensified, conflicting interpretations emerged from nearly every corner of the discussion. One group viewed the letter as a missing piece of a much larger puzzle, a document that might explain decisions, tensions, or relationships that had puzzled royal observers for years. Another group saw danger in that very assumption. They feared that allowing the contents to become widely known could ignite controversy, reopen old wounds, and place immense pressure on individuals who had no opportunity to respond to the questions being raised. The divide grew sharper with each passing day. What one person considered a revelation, another considered a risk. Yet beneath every theory, every argument, and every whispered discussion lay a deeper sense of anticipation. The letter had already challenged expectations simply by existing. Now it was challenging assumptions as well. Sophie found herself standing at the center of a storm she had never sought, surrounded by experts, advisors, and insiders all searching for answers. But despite the growing fascination with what the letter actually said, investigators were about to uncover a detail that would overshadow every word written on the page. Because yet the true shock wasn't what the letter said it was when investigators discovered when it had been written. Dates have a way of changing everything. And when the timeline behind the hidden letter finally emerged, it connected the document to one of the most sensitive periods in modern royal history. Up until that point, the debate had centered on the contents of the letter and the mystery of how it had remained hidden for so long. But the moment investigators established when it had been written, the entire story took on a new and far more dramatic dimension. What had seemed like an isolated discovery suddenly became intertwined with a chapter of royal history already filled with intense scrutiny, private tensions, and decisions that would shape the monarchy for years to come. The date attached to the letter did more than place it within a timeline. It connected it to events that many believed had long been settled, reopening questions that had quietly lingered beneath the surface. As historians and archivists continued their review, they began comparing the letter's timing with major developments unfolding within the royal family during that same period. The overlap was impossible to ignore. Certain transitions, discussion shifts in royal dynamics were already occurring behind palace walls. Now, the existence of this correspondence seemed to add an entirely new layer to the story. Suddenly, conversations that once appeared straightforward seemed more complicated. Decisions that had been publicly understood one way now carried the possibility of hidden context. The letter did not provide all the answers, but it introduced enough uncertainty to make people question whether they truly understood what had happened during those pivotal years. Inside the palace, discussions grew increasingly serious. Senior officials reportedly spent hours examining records, timelines, and supporting documents in an effort to determine the letter's relevance. Some argued that the date merely reflected a moment in history and should not be viewed as evidence of anything more significant. Others disagreed. They believed timing often reveals as much as the words themselves. In their view, understanding when the letter was written could be just as important as understanding why it was written. The divide created a growing sense of urgency. Every detail mattered. Every date, every record, every archived note suddenly carried potential significance. At the center of it all stood Sophie. By now, she had become one of the strongest voices advocating for a thorough and transparent examination. While speculation continued to spread, she reportedly insisted that every claim be verified and every assumption challenged. She understood the risks of drawing conclusions too quickly. The letter had already generated enough intrigue to fuel endless theories. What was needed now was certainty, yet certainty proved frustratingly difficult to achieve. Each verified fact seemed to uncover another unanswered question. Each discovery pushed the investigation deeper into territory few expected to revisit. Outside palace circles, word of the hidden letter continued to spread. Royal commentators, journalists, and longtime observers became increasingly fascinated by the unfolding mystery. Rumors multiplied. Interpretations varied wildly. Some believed a major revelation was approaching. Others cautioned that speculation was racing far ahead of evidence. Regardless of where people stood, one thing became clear. Public interest was growing at an extraordinary pace. What had begun as a private archival discovery was steadily becoming a matter of national curiosity. The rising attention ensured that senior royals could no longer remain distant observers. Reports of private briefings and confidential discussions began circulating as awareness of the situation reached the highest levels. Questions that had once been confined to historians and advisors were now being considered by figures whose lives had been shaped by the very period under examination. The past was no longer staying in the past. It was beginning to influence the present in ways nobody had anticipated. Yet even as conversations focused on old events and forgotten decisions, another problem was quietly taking shape, hidden from public view, but destined to become impossible to ignore. Because while attention focused on the past, a new crisis was quietly developing behind palace doors. Sophie had spent years avoiding royal controversy. Now she found herself standing at the center of one, and according to insiders, she had no intention of backing away. The hidden letter had already transformed from an obscure archival discovery into one of the most closely watched mysteries within royal circles. What began as a question about a forgotten document had evolved into a growing struggle over truth, history, and responsibility. As speculation intensified and private discussions multiplied behind palace walls, Sophie reached a conclusion that would significantly raise the stakes. Rather than allowing the matter to remain trapped in uncertainty, she reportedly requested a formal review of the document and its origins. It was a decisive move, one that signaled her determination to pursue answers, no matter how uncomfortable those answers might become. For someone known throughout the royal family for her discretion, caution, and measured approach, the decision carried enormous weight. It suggested that Sophie believed the issue had become too important to ignore. The request immediately triggered a wave of debate among advisors, officials, and those tasked with protecting the monarchy's stability. Some argued that the findings should remain private, confined to a small group of trusted individuals who could evaluate them away from public scrutiny. Their concern was simple. Once sensitive information enters public discussion, controlling the narrative becomes nearly impossible. Others disagreed. They believed that suppressing questions would only deepen suspicion and fuel even greater speculation. The divide reflected a broader tension that had been building ever since the letter surfaced. Was this merely a historical matter best handled quietly, or had it become something the public would eventually demand to understand? As those debates unfolded, concern about public reaction grew steadily. Palace officials understood that the story possessed all the ingredients capable of capturing widespread attention. It involved a hidden document, unanswered questions, and connections to some of the most closely scrutinized figures in the royal family. Even without definitive conclusions, the mystery itself was enough to generate intense interest. Rumors continued spreading faster than facts. Every leak, every whispered account, and every conflicting interpretation seemed to add another layer of intrigue. The palace faced a difficult challenge. How could it prepare for a reaction when nobody yet knew where the investigation would lead? Behind the scenes, communications teams reportedly began developing contingency plans. While no official position had been established, preparations were quietly made for various outcomes. Advisors examined potential scenarios, anticipating how different revelations might be received by the public, the media, and the wider royal institution. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense. What had once been viewed as a contained archival matter was now being treated as a potential crisis requiring careful management. Every development was monitored closely. Every new discovery was weighed against the possibility of wider consequences. At the same time, deeper divisions began emerging between competing royal factions. Individuals who previously viewed the investigation as routine now found themselves taking sides. Some supported Sophie's insistence on transparency and thorough examination. Others worried that pursuing the matter too aggressively could destabilize already sensitive relationships. The disagreements remained largely private, but they reflected a growing struggle over how the monarchy should respond. The hidden letter was no longer just a document. It had become a symbol of competing priorities, competing loyalties, and competing visions of how the institution should protect itself. Through it all, Sophie's reputation continued to shape perceptions of the investigation. She was not known for seeking attention or creating controversy, quite the opposite. Her history of quiet service and careful judgment made it difficult for many observers to dismiss her concerns. If someone with her reputation believed the matter deserved serious examination, people naturally assumed there must be a reason. That credibility gave her actions extraordinary influence, even as pressure mounted from every direction. Yet with each passing day, the stakes continued rising. More people became aware of the letter. More questions demanded answers. And as discussions intensified, the question was no longer whether the letter mattered, but who would be affected once its story became impossible to contain. What started as a hidden document had become the subject of whispered conversations across royal residences. Every meeting seemed to lead back to the same question. Why had this letter remained secret for so long? By now, the mystery had grown far beyond the walls of the archive where it was first discovered. The hidden letter was no longer simply a matter for historians, advisors, or a small circle of palace officials. It had become a story with a life of its own. Everywhere the issue surfaced, it seemed to leave behind another unanswered question. Palace staff, who initially viewed the discovery as an isolated curiosity, now found themselves caught in a storm of speculation. Private conversations became increasingly cautious. Long-settled assumptions were suddenly being reconsidered. Even those with no direct involvement in the investigation could sense that something significant was unfolding. The uncertainty was impossible to ignore. Inside royal residences, discussions reportedly became more frequent and more intense. Staff members exchanged fragments of information, trying to separate fact from rumor. Some believed the letter's importance had been exaggerated through endless retellings. Others argued the opposite, insisting that the growing effort to understand its origins suggested there was far more beneath the surface than anyone initially realized. Every theory seemed plausible for a moment before another emerged to challenge it. The result was an atmosphere of constant anticipation, as though everyone was waiting for a missing piece that had yet to appear. Outside palace circles, interest was spreading rapidly. Media outlets began pursuing leads, searching for clues that might explain why the letter had remained hidden for so many years. Journalists contacted former staff members, historians, and royal commentators, hoping to uncover information that had escaped official reviews. The lack of clear answers only fueled greater curiosity. In the absence of certainty, speculation flourished. Reports circulated, opinions multiplied. Every small detail suddenly carried outsized significance. What had started as a private discovery was becoming a public fascination. Royal commentators soon entered the debate, each offering a different interpretation of what the letter might mean. Some suggested it could provide valuable context to events that had puzzled observers for years. Others warned against drawing conclusions before all the evidence had been examined. The divisions reflected the complexity of the situation itself. There was no clear consensus, only competing narratives, competing explanations, and a growing sense that the full story had yet to emerge. Every public discussion seemed to deepen the mystery rather than solve it. At the same time, historical experts intensified their own review. They examined timelines, records, and correspondence from the period connected to the document. Their goal was not merely to understand the letter itself, but to understand its place within the broader history of the monarchy. The implications were potentially far-reaching. If the document had been overlooked accidentally, that would raise one set of questions. If it had been intentionally set aside, that would raise another entirely. The distinction mattered enormously, and experts knew it. As investigations continued, attention increasingly shifted toward a particularly sensitive issue. Who knew about the letter before Sophie discovered it? The question surfaced repeatedly because it struck at the heart of the mystery. Had the document truly been forgotten, or had knowledge of its existence survived within a small circle of trusted individuals? No definitive answers emerged, but the possibility alone created new tensions. Every theory seemed to point toward someone who might have known more than they ever revealed. With each passing day, pressure mounted for greater transparency. Calls for clarity grew louder both inside and outside royal circles. The public wanted answers. Commentators wanted answers. Even those conducting the investigation wanted answers. Yet the closer people came to understanding the mystery, the more another possibility began to emerge, one that could alter relationships at the highest levels of the monarchy. By now, the hidden letter was no longer merely a historical curiosity. It had become a symbol of unanswered questions, buried tensions, and unfinished chapters within the royal family. What made the situation so extraordinary was not simply the document itself, but the way it had transformed everything around it. A single letter, once forgotten and hidden from view, had evolved into a catalyst for conversations that many believed would never take place. The mystery had moved beyond archives, beyond advisors, and beyond palace historians. It now occupied the center of a much larger debate about trust, accountability, and the relationship between the monarchy's past and its future. Every new discussion seemed to reveal another layer of complexity. Every attempt to settle the matter only intensified interest. What had started as a search for answers had become a reckoning with questions that had remained dormant for years. Behind closed doors, senior royals reportedly began privately discussing the implications of the discovery. These were not casual conversations. They involved individuals who understood better than anyone how even the smallest revelation could reshape public perception. The concerns extended far beyond the contents of the letter itself. If the document had truly been overlooked, what did that say about the systems designed to preserve royal history? If it had been known to certain individuals, why had it never surfaced before? The questions were difficult, uncomfortable, and impossible to dismiss. Every possible explanation carried consequences. Every potential answer seemed capable of reopening old debates many had hoped were settled. At the same time, public interest surged to levels few had anticipated. What had once been a mystery known only to a handful of insiders was now attracting attention. Across the country and beyond, discussions spread rapidly. Commentators revisited old events. Historians examined long-forgotten timelines. Supporters and critics alike searched for clues that might explain the significance of the letter. The fascination was fueled not only by what people knew, but by what they did not know. Uncertainty created intrigue, and intrigue created momentum. The story seemed to grow larger with every passing day. Amid this growing storm, Sophie found herself under increasing scrutiny. Her role in bringing attention to the letter placed her at the center of a debate she had never sought. Some praised her determination to pursue the truth, regardless of where it might lead. To them, she represented integrity, patience, and a commitment to ensuring that important questions were not ignored simply because they were uncomfortable. They argued that transparency strengthens institutions rather than weakens them. In their eyes, Sophie's actions reflected a belief that history deserves careful examination, even when the findings challenge long-held assumptions. Others viewed the situation very differently. Critics argued that some matters belong in private archives rather than public debate. They feared that continued attention could create unnecessary controversy and place strain on relationships already tested by years of public scrutiny. Their concerns reflected a broader tension that had followed the monarchy for generations. How much of its history should remain private, and how much should be shared with the public? There were no easy answers. Every position carried risks. Every argument carried emotional weight. As pressure mounted from all sides, the palace found itself navigating an increasingly difficult path. Tradition demanded caution. Public expectations demanded openness. Balancing those competing forces became one of the greatest challenges of the entire affair. The institution that had spent decades preserving stability now found itself confronting a story driven by uncertainty. Yet beneath every debate, every headline, and every private discussion, one fact remained unchanged. The mystery was still incomplete. The hidden letter had already altered perceptions, strained loyalties, and reignited forgotten questions. But even as debates raged, one final revelation remained, and it would determine how this extraordinary story would ultimately be remembered. In the end, the hidden letter was about more than a single document. It was about legacy, trust, and the enduring power of secrets. What Sophie uncovered forced the monarchy to confront questions that had lingered in the shadows for years. As the dust slowly began to settle, many realized that the true significance of the discovery was never confined to the words written on a piece of paper. The letter had become something larger. It had become a mirror reflecting decades of assumptions, loyalties, and unanswered questions that had quietly followed the royal family through changing eras. What started as an unexpected find inside the late Queen's private study evolved into a story that challenged perceptions and forced people to reconsider how history is preserved, interpreted, and remembered. The mystery captivated attention not because it offered simple answers, but because it exposed how easily important truths can become buried beneath time, tradition, and silence. At the center of that transformation stood Sophie. Her decision to pursue the matter, despite growing pressure, changed the course of the entire story. She could have accepted the simplest explanation and allowed the document to disappear back into the archives. Instead, she insisted on asking difficult questions. That choice carried consequences. It placed her under intense scrutiny and drew her into a controversy she had spent years avoiding. Yet it also earned respect from those who believed that preserving history requires courage as much as discretion. Whether praised or criticized, Sophie's role ensured that the letter would not simply fade into obscurity. Her determination transformed a forgotten document into a moment of reflection for the entire institution. The investigation also revealed something deeper about royal history itself. History is often remembered through major events, public appearances, and official records. But sometimes the most revealing details are hidden in places few people ever think to look. A single document, overlooked for years, demonstrated how much of the past can remain concealed even within one of the most documented families in the world. The hidden letter reminded everyone that history is rarely as straightforward as it appears. Behind every public chapter lies another story waiting to be discovered, another perspective waiting to be understood. As discussions continued, broader themes emerged. Transparency became a central part of the conversation. So did legacy. The monarchy has always relied on continuity, stability, and public trust. Yet trust is strengthened when difficult questions can be addressed rather than avoided. The debate surrounding the letter highlighted the delicate balance between protecting tradition and embracing openness. Neither side possessed all the answers. Both reflected values that have shaped the monarchy for generations. that tension became one of the story's most enduring lessons. Public reaction to the final revelations reflected that complexity. Some people viewed the discovery as proof that hidden chapters of history deserve greater attention. Others believed the focus on the letter had gone too far, arguing that not every mystery requires public examination. Yet, regardless of opinion, few could deny the impact the story had made. It sparked conversations across royal circles and beyond. It encouraged renewed interest in the past. Most importantly, it demonstrated how a single discovery can alter the way people view events they once believed they fully understood. For the monarchy, the hidden letter represents more than a controversy. It marks the beginning of a new chapter shaped by lessons from the past. The institution now moves forward, carrying a deeper awareness of how fragile historical narratives can be and how important it is to preserve them with honesty and care. The story may eventually fade from headlines and the debates may gradually lose intensity, but the questions raised by Sophie's discovery will continue to echo through discussions of royal history for years to come. And while the palace may eventually move forward, the mystery of the hidden Camilla letter will remain a reminder that some royal secrets refuse to stay buried forever. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.